Hey,
Hi,
Angela, how are
Adrian.
you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Excited to be on your show. Big fan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm a big fan of yours. I've learned so much from people who we both respect. Shout out to Ted James for making this
Yes.
happen.
Yes.
And of course, my
Ted is
team,
always on it.
Steven, Naja, they're fantastic. So
Yeah,
thank
Ted
you.
is always on it. He's a big time hero to a lot of people down here in Louisiana, and our legislator fighting each and every day to make sure that Louisiana's stronger. So, a big fan of Ted's.
It's so funny because he is somebody who reminds me a lot of how my dad moves. There's not like hardly anybody in Seattle who doesn't have my dad's cell phone number. So Ted is
Yeah.
the same way. Like
Yeah.
people have a
Yeah.
flat tire, call Ted.
Yeah.
People want a bill pass, call Ted. People got
Yeah.
a billboard issue, call Ted. Like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
great.
No,
But
you're
he's
right
a
about
man of the
that.
people.
He is. No, he really is.
Yeah. So tell me, Adrian, tell us, how's the race going? What's the state of the
The
race?
The race is going phenomenally. We have shattered all expectations up to this point with endorsements from President Barack Obama. I mean, this was the only race in Louisiana that he endorsed. We got endorsements from future Vice President Kamala Harris as well, the DSCC, and at the state level, the Democratic Party has endorsed Governor John Bel Edwards, our friend Ted James, and a lot of different lawmakers throughout the state. So momentum is building. We crossed the $2 million mark yesterday. And we're, like I said, we're just shattering all expectations, and it's looking like we're going to be going into a runoff at this point. So we're excited about that, and everybody will be paying attention to Louisiana in a runoff because that election would take place in December.
Yeah, that is incredible. And congratulations on your progress so far. What's the greatest lesson you've learned so far campaigning for the United States Senate?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I don't even think I've been asked that before. I'd say the greatest lesson that I've learned is that the problems that we experience here in Shreveport are problems that people throughout our state experience, whether you're in a rural area, whether you're in a bigger city, whether you're in a smaller city. But the problems here are just microcosms for things that people are experiencing throughout the state. And those concerns, that suffering throughout the state is made a lot more uniform with COVID-19. So, I'm learning on the road. I'm learning the nuances of all the different parish names and the different parish personalities. But I'm also learning that, what we're going through is the same that people around Louisiana is going through. And I would imagine the rest of the country.
Yeah, and that is kind of interesting that COVID-19 has created this environment of it's been a great unifier in some really morbid ways, but
Yeah.
also in some really powerful ways. We watch people come together all over the country to do things and to give back and to provide services that you would expect for the government to provide. And it's incredible to see human willpower and unity show up in the massive ways that it has. What are some things that you would like to do in the United States Senate to, kind of move the ball down the field as it relates to COVID and to prevent more COVID deaths?
Yeah, no, you're right. I want to go back on something that you said. That is a silver lining to these crises that we faced this year, that people are coming together. And just something I want to highlight. We were the first people in Louisiana to actually recognize and start talking about the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on the Black community. The Washington Post actually covered this story, and the Black community came together in a major way, and the city of Shreveport really came together in a major way so that we could curb the viral spread in our community. And we made the New York Times list, I think, of the 7th city in the country with slowest viral spread. But it just speaks to what happens when we do come together. And we're confident that in this election that people are going to come together who are frustrated with my opponent, Senator Cassidy, and his record, his horrible record with the response to COVID-19, his horrible record with healthcare, trying to repeal or replace the Affordable Care Act with something that would have been disastrous for most Louisianians. So I think that's really going to take place on Election Day. And I'll say that, as far as like what I want to do when I get to the Senate, first thing is make sure that we get a sufficient COVID-19 response bill to make sure that people get their unemployment benefits that my opponent has voted against, to make sure that municipalities like my own can have federal dollars to cover budget shortfalls so that mayors don't have to lay off essential workers that work in, public safety or work when it comes to, picking up trash, those type of essential services. and making sure that overall we keep our people strong so that we can have a strong economy on the other side of it. And then after that, I want to make sure that we really protect the Affordable Care Act and we stop all this crazy litigation that's going to the Supreme Court that's undermining it. First, they took away the individual mandate. Now they're trying to allow insurance company to bar those with pre-existing conditions. And we really need to be fighting to pass laws to protect our people.
You have an opponent who's currently sitting in the United States Senate and doesn't have a great track record at not only serving all of Louisiana, but particularly when we talk about Black folks in Louisiana. Can you highlight just for a moment, Adrian, because I think it's so important for people to hear some of the things that you want to do to fight for Black Louisianans in the United States Senate?
Yeah, I hinted at it earlier in talking about the Affordable Care Act and making sure that we strengthen it and making sure that we actually expand it to cover even more people. When Governor Edwards, our Democratic governor, came into office, he expanded Medicaid, and overnight hundreds of thousands of Louisianans had access to health insurance. Right now, we know that over 500,000 Louisianans have health insurance because of the Affordable Care Act. That is critical for us to keep, and like I said, and expand it to make it even more affordable, make it even more accessible. And that's something that I'll be doing for African Americans because we are disproportionately represented within that number of people that did not have health care coverage. Something else I want to do that would acutely affect the African American community in a positive way is making sure we raise the national minimum wage as well. That's $7.25. If you're making that here in Louisiana, you can't even afford an apartment. And Louisiana is one of the most affordable places in this country. So we got to make sure that we having those tough discussions that, again, are going to make sure we are uplifting the African American community. And my opponent has talked about, closing down HBCUs, turning them into prisons, all this other crazy stuff. And it just shows how disconnected he is from the Black community. And, he got a track record that shows he's disconnected from the people of Louisiana, period.
Adrian, I'm curious to know, listening to you speak, I'm surprised that there hasn't been as much national attention on your race as, let's say, Jamie Harrison in South Carolina or some other folks running for the Senate, including the guy in Michigan that nobody knows is conservative. This is why you shouldn't assume Black faces are progressive.
He's a West Point grad. He's a West Point grad too, by the way.
I saw. However, what I also saw is that all your skin folk ain't your kinfolk. You didn't say it, I did. But I just, want to just double down on this point. Mm-hmm. For the folks who are watching and will hear this nationally, what's the most important thing you need for them to know? Because when you get to the United States Senate, that would make you, well, if Jamie goes, I'm going to say it as if Jamie's going too. That would make you 5. That would make you 5 if we count Tim Scott. It would make 5 Black senators in the United States Senate. We can only count Tim Scott sometimes. Again, you didn't say it, I did. I don't know what he'd be voting for sometimes. But I want to know, there's another constituency that you'd be serving there. It is Black America writ large. It is, of course, doing the right thing for all the American people. But when you think about the fact that we don't have enough advocates, we don't even make up 10%, not even 3%. It's barely 3%. It's 3% of the United States Senate. What is your pledge to Black folks tuning in? Like, this is how I'm going to serve y'all. This is how I'm going to fight and advocate for y'all when I'm in the United States Senate. Yeah,
again, it's going to be similar to what I'd be doing for the African-American Black citizens here in Louisiana. Make sure I'm fighting for health care. Make sure I'm fighting to raise the minimum wage. Make sure I'm fighting to pass infrastructure bills that will create jobs right there in your community that can't be outsourced. Make sure that I'm fighting for education resources to be poured in for child care for families, for early childhood education, so that our community stops starting off our educational path on the wrong foot and our zip code determining our educational outcome. And overall, just and symbolically, that would be a win because we would have more representation. 4 out of every 10 registered voters here in Louisiana are African American, yet our national delegation only has 1 of our 5 congressmen as an African American and none of our senators. So this is extremely important to make sure we simply have representation going forward, Absolutely. Which we don't right now. So that's, that would be big for us all around. Look, Angela, let me tell you, I'm from one of the poorest neighborhoods here in Shreveport. You don't know how many times people from my old neighborhood come up to me and say, man, you were such an inspiration to see all the things that you have done, all the things that you were doing. I didn't have that when I was growing up. I didn't have a person I could look up to or a path for me to go down, and I had to figure it out, and that makes it that much more difficult. If young people in Louisiana, black, white, see a young United States senator that's fighting for their interests, that will inspire so many people, and not just in Louisiana, but throughout the country.
That's exactly right, Adrian. And to that point, you know, these congressional hearings, the Senate hearings for the new, well, it looks like she's going to be the Supreme Court Justice, the next Supreme Court Justice, filling Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat. If you were on the Judiciary Committee right now, and you had the opportunity to question Amy Coney Barrett, what's one thing you would ask her about?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you the thing that I would ask Amy Coney Barrett. Well, let me say, first of all, I wouldn't want to be asking her anything because I would have been focusing our attention on passing a relief bill since the Senate has had the House bill since May. Exactly. That's what I would be. That's what I would be focusing my energy and effort on. But I'll tell you, you know, in the vein of the conversation that we're having, I'm a little bit concerned about one of her decisions that said that using the N-word didn't create a hostile work environment. So that would be one of the questions that I would ask.
Like, what is that? Yes.
Angela, you got to explain it to me. I'm not sure. You know, being an African American, understanding.
We did a podcast the other day with Ari Berman, the voting rights legend, and I read the part. Like, what are we talking about? What are we actually talking about? Anyway, it's your turn. Yeah,
and no, you're right on. I mean, I'm the mayor of a city, and this is a strong mayor form of government. I got 3,000 employees, and we try to create the absolute best work environment possible. I couldn't imagine. I know exactly what I would do if a document came across my desk describing a work environment where anybody used any derogatory term towards another coworker, let alone using the N-word. So, you know, I would ask that question.
Yeah, I think it's an important one, and I don't think that it was asked. And I don't know, maybe I missed it, but I did not see an answer from her on that. And I think that it's highly problematic that she would actually say, these are the things that I would uphold, and then some things she would refuse to answer at all. So you knew the things where she was refusing to answer were just not right, you know. Anyway, I can't even believe this is a conversation. This dude.
I can't either, especially like the people of Louisiana. I mean, I can tell you there were food insecurities for 20% of our families starting in April this year. Yeah. People in Louisiana are literally out here starving, trying to figure out how to make ends meet because our economy is, you know, crushed under COVID-19. And we got a senator that's more interested in pushing through a Supreme Court justice than fighting for them to have the resources that they need.
That's exactly right. And I think that those are some of the biggest problems, Adrian. It's so important that there are people sitting in the United States Senate, not high and mighty, but still really connected to the people on the ground. You talked about healthcare. You talked about minimum wage and creating jobs through infrastructure programs. But the other thing that's, you know, plaguing our community right now are issues around criminal justice reform and police violence. These are issues that have plagued Black Louisianans in particular since our arrival on these shores. And I think it's so important, too, to have someone who can tie in a cohesive agenda to our economics, as well as our ability just to survive. We know that the Declaration of Independence, as written, did not apply to us because we weren't even deemed as fully human. So what does it look like to ensure a full existence for Black people that is both safe and robust, you know, truly liberated? And I think it's time for us to think about things that way.
I agree with you. And this is a moment for me to fanboy out a little bit, but I loved your track on PJ Morton's CD about that. You killed it. But I'll tell you, I actually met Ted James in the summer of 2016. I was a first-year law student working with Governor John Bell Edwards on criminal justice reform. We know Representative James led that charge in the legislature. But in working on that criminal justice reform bill with the governor and doing research on it and really looking at our criminal justice system in Louisiana, that at the time was the most incarcerated state and the most incarcerated country in the world, it really, got my interest in it even more so than just my personal experiences with the criminal justice system and family members going away and, on drug charges and a bunch of other things like that. And it showed me how big this problem was. That's something that I want to just emphasize to anybody that's listening that's outside of Louisiana. My opponent would refuse to even, acknowledge, these problems that we experience, but also he would fail to review or seek to reform qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is that legal bar that our courts are using that is, freed a lot of police officers that our community thought were wrong and use excessive force or deadly force on people that look like us. That's something that I would do in going to the Senate. I would be very much open so that we could reform that to make it more consistent with what everybody wants our legal system to represent and be. But that's just one part. We got to make sure that we're providing wraparound services as we approach criminal justice reform. We can't just say, hey, we are going to stop our people from going to prison without offering them opportunities. That's the reason why I think this conversation starts very early on. I think it starts in our education system and making sure that we are investing in childhood education so that our people are prepared to go into the workforce. I can tell you my most concern, the demographic here that I'm most concerned about are African-American boys who are dropping out of high school at the highest rates and entering the job market at the lowest rates. That creates that's a window of time for our African-American boys to get in trouble and, unfortunately become a part of our criminal justice system. And I want to stop that. We need to make sure that we have policies, we have laws, we are putting in resources to really stop that cycle so that we can uplift our community in the long term and stop losing our future.
To the point you were talking about, Senator Cassidy refusing to acknowledge some things. One other thing he's refused to acknowledge, frankly, is your presence in this race. He's refusing to debate you. Why do you think that is?
Well, he's embarrassed of his record, and I think he might be a bit afraid of us. And I can tell you, yesterday he acknowledged this because we're running statewide TV ads that's bringing up his record with trying to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. So he has a horrible record that he is afraid to defend. Even if you look at his TV commercials, they're misleading at best. When he's talking about, hey, I stand up for troops, yet he said nothing when there were Russian bounties being placed on the soldiers, U.S. soldiers' head. He said nothing when our president made comments about veterans being losers and suckers. So, he's talking about, hey, I'm fighting for more affordable drugs, but yet he has voted against the United States being able to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies, and he's taken millions of dollars from them and insurance companies. So, I think he has a bad record. I think he knows that he's not fighting for the interests of all of us, especially the Black community, and he doesn't want to get on record to have to answer those questions.
Yeah, and, well, agreed. You
can say what you want, Angela. I gotta be.
I'm just saying. What is a shame is that the way that Senator Cassidy moves is not an exception; it's the norm. Is what I was thinking. And there are too many people in the United States Senate who have gotten there with the rich and powerful and at the expense of the poor and the voiceless. And I just think that it's super important that we balance out that quotient too. Speaking of the fact that we're not represented, there are a lot of people who are not represented in the United States Senate. It's become a place for the elites to play. And I don't think that's acceptable or okay.
I agree.
One thing I haven't said yet, my dad was born in Shreveport. He left when he was 10. Yeah, with my grandparents. Wild. My grandmother is from Keachai.
Okay. So have you visited? Have you been to Shreveport?
I have been to Shreveport. We had a family reunion in Shreveport. It's been a long time. I haven't been since you've been mayor. But
gotcha. Well, y'all come back to visit. Bring your dad back.
I definitely will. And I definitely want to make sure he knows about your race. But this is the point, right? I think that is so important that Black folks with platforms are giving our young people and even some of our jaded, disenchanted, disenfranchised folks the opportunity to see people like you, Adrian. It's important to know that we have people in elected office who treat elected office as public service. Where did you get that set of values from? Yeah,
I'm going to tell you, I got it from my mom. Growing up, watching my mom, who raised me and my two older brothers by herself. My father left when I was about 3 years old. My mom didn't make any excuses. My mom worked multiple jobs. She would pick me up from school. We would go to office buildings at nighttime. I would do my homework at office buildings while my mom cleaned up. Just worked her fingers to the bone, all for us. She would even get up from the dinner table sometimes when we didn't have enough food so me and my brothers could eat what we had. So I saw somebody at a very young age sacrifice everything for her family. Nothing personal gain at all. And I've really, as an adult, I've come to realize that she was my greatest inspiration. You know, when 9/11 happened, when September 11th happened and I was a high school junior, I was not planning on going into the military until that morning, but in seeing the fear on people's faces here, on my classmates' faces, family faces, faces in the community, I said, hey, I'm going to step up and I'm going to protect my family. I'm going to protect my community. And I really think I got that passion, that kind of guiding principle from my mom and watching her as I grew up.
It's amazing how many lessons we learn from our parents. And so for some reason, they are planted and they finally take root. Maybe sometimes partway through college. I feel like I've learned a lot of them in law school. I know they have to feel like, how long does this take for these folks to get this?
Yeah, no, big time.
There's things that they said to me growing up that I still haven't forgotten. So I love that story about your mom. Are your brothers and is your mom involved in your campaign?
Yes. Both of my brothers, one of my brothers lives in Maryland, one of my brothers lives here in Shreveport. And yeah, they canvassed for me. Even when I ran for mayor, they canvassed for me. They knocked on doors. They talked to all their friends. And my entire family is doing it out there. So I got some huge supporters in my family and friends. And yeah, we're pushing. We're excited right now.
Adrian, did you grow up civically engaged, or is that something that you evolved into? Were your folks, all your family, always voting folks, always involved?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, always voting people, but nobody ever ran for elected office or any of that. My mom is actually from a place in Bossier Parish named Plain Dillon. My mom and my father, a rural community. My grandfather was a sharecropper up there. So, you know, I come from very humble beginnings. I was going to my grandparents' house, still using an outhouse in the 90s. So, but they were avid voters and engaged. And I'll tell you, I wasn't until high school when I started to be more civically engaged, because I was just an athlete before, or I thought I was just an athlete before. I played sports. I was an all-state track and field athlete, played football, basketball. But one of my classmates walked up to me and said, you should run for student government. And I said, well, you know, I don't do that. I'm just a jock. And she was like, oh, the only thing you got to do is put your name on the list. It's a popularity contest. So I put my name on the list and I won. And being in student government, I got to see how I could actually help out people around me and my classmates. And I said, hey, you know, I really like this. And I kept going.
Wow. So this isn't, you're like, I'm not new to this. I've been doing this since high school. I did a little student government in high school too. I also co-founded my Black Student Union.
Okay. I see you.
Yeah, my dad didn't play. I'm named after Angela Davis. He don't mess around.
Yeah, I see that.
So one other question, we haven't really talked about your experience as an Army vet. What are some of the things that you want to do for veterans? I think they're such an important part of our society. We know veterans who look like you aren't always treated with the respect they deserve upon their return. Certainly not some of our ancestors and forebears. What are some of the things you want to do for the veteran community?
Yeah, and I mean, just going back, putting some historical context, we know that a lot of our ancestors didn't get a chance to take part in the New Deal. And one of those things was the GI Bill that was given out that allowed veterans to go to college. A lot of African Americans were barred from those benefits. And, you know, to this day, like you said, there's some disproportionate impacts. But I'll say, I served in Iraq as a 23-year-old, leading a platoon of soldiers. About 30, I served 8 years in the military altogether, culminating with company command in Afghanistan. And I served alongside America's heroes. I've seen these people sacrifice everything for our country. I've seen their families sacrifice so much for our country as well. And we have to treat them with the same dignity and respect that we do while they're in the service fighting for our rights, when they get out of the service and when they come back home. And ways you do that is making sure that we are putting resources towards transitioning our veterans into, you know, the job market, making sure that they have jobs. We know that the veteran community has very high rates of unemployment. We know the veteran community has very high rates of homelessness. We know the veteran community has very high rates of mental illness. And we got to make sure that when we say we're really fighting for veterans, that we're voting on those things. If you're a lawmaker and we're talking about those things, being advocates, all of us, because veterans fight for all of our rights, for our right to protest, for, I mean, you know, anything you think about, the country that we live in, the way of life. And we got to be committed to that. And I can tell you my experiences, my intimate experiences with veterans will definitely make me a very, very strong advocate for them. And I will never forget where I came from and make sure that I'm fighting for them as well when I'm in the Senate.
You served tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. What life experiences did you have there that shaped some of your worldview now?
Yeah, a lot of them. I can tell you a lot of life experience. I'll tell you a story about my first patrol. So you're on a outpost in Iraq or Afghanistan, and when you go on patrol, you have to leave that outpost and you go into the communities. So it was my first patrol. I'm 23 years old. I got a platoon of 30 soldiers, average age about 27. I'm responsible for millions of dollars of equipment, American lives. And I'm telling you, I am afraid. I am scared because I've been watching CNN. I've been watching Fox News. And I just know we're going to get, you know, in a gunfight and we're going to get blown up and all this other stuff. And I looked around my platoon and, you know, and the other vehicles, and they were afraid too. And I thought about it in that moment before we got to the point we had to dismount. I was like, I'm the leader of this patrol. I'm responsible for their lives. Like, I have to do something to instill confidence, encouraging them so that we can accomplish this mission. You know, I know us being afraid is a natural thing, but we have to accomplish the mission. So when it came time to dismount that vehicle, I said, hey, you got a responsibility to these men. I stepped out. I put one foot in front of the other. And I just seen that fear kind of go off their faces, and we accomplished that mission. And I was able to bring all of them back home to their parents and their families. So I can tell you, I think the one big principle that I got from my military service was, if you are in charge, you need to take responsibility for the people that you're in charge with. You need to lead selflessly, and you need to do all you can to look after their well-being.
Wow. That's powerful. I'm just thinking now about the folks who are still torn, Adrian, about whether or not to vote. Not whether or not to vote for you or Bill Cassidy, but just whether or not to vote at all. You know, there's a lot going on to target, I think, specifically Black men. As a Black man sitting there, not just as a voter, but as someone who needs their vote, who wants their vote and wants to go fight for them, what's something that you would say to your peers, to people who you may be old enough to mentor, and the folks who are old enough to mentor you, to get them to really turn out all over the country, but especially in Louisiana?
Yeah, I would start off by saying I understand. I know what it's like to be disenchanted with the process, to live in a society where you feel marginalized and you feel hopeless. I completely understand. And you feel like, hey, I voted before and nothing changed. I'm still living in the same situation. But what I want to emphasize is this. America, there is no inevitable progress that we're going to be a part of. We think about our right to vote, and today, just look at the right to vote. Well, we wouldn't have that right if it wasn't for our forefathers, our ancestors and Americans fighting and dying for us to be in this position. And if we don't continue to push and put pressure on the system, we could even lose this right. And I tell you that because when people think about voter suppression, what all came to mind was images of the 1950s, 1940s, things like the literacy test, things like the poll tax, grandfather clause. But what we're seeing, the exact same thing happen today. It's just transformed and is more sophisticated. So that should tell you, look, I get if you're disenchanted, I get if you're frustrated, but this is a continual fight that we have to wake up each and every morning and push and push and push, not just on election day, even in between elections, if we want to truly uplift our community and uplift America overall.
What are you seeing on the ground? And shout out to Ted James, who finally just got in here. But we already.
I'm surprised. He's a busy man.
I know he's busy answering those calls we talked about. Yeah. Now I just shouted out Ted and forgot what I was saying. Oh, when you when you think about what you're seeing on the ground as you're going around campaigning and talking to folks, what are some of the common responses you hear about voting? And I'd love to hear how you respond to them. I know you said a lot of what you just shared, but in addition to that, what else are you hearing and seeing on the ground?
I can tell you, Angela, this year is, I mean, it's historic. Everybody I've talked to is very excited to vote this year. And if anything, you just get like, hey, I need more information about where's my early voting site, or what precinct am I in, or am I still registered? You get questions where we got to provide information, but people are engaged. And I can tell you, Louisiana has shattered our early voting records. Our highest vote total on day one was 86,000 votes. This year, over 157,000 votes were cast on day one.
Wow.
As of last night, over 350,000 votes were cast. So people are excited, people are motivated, and you know, this year should serve as an inspiration. We need to keep up this energy, not just for a presidential, but for every election. You know, this is one of those times where people can really experience their franchise and see how powerful it is, and them changing the things around them. And we got to keep this energy up.
We definitely do. And Adrian, I know you know better than so many of us that voting is the beginning, right? It's the first step that we can take. For folks who don't want to run for office, what's the next step you tell them after they vote?
Find something you're passionate about. It could be one thing, it could be two things, it could be three things, and start to advocate for it. Even if you're not an elected official, engage your elected officials, engage your local leadership. You know, I tell people the most powerful people in a community are my bosses, the citizens themselves. And I say that because I wouldn't be here without them. You know, I'm thinking not just in a vote, but in the fact that I came out of Cedar Grove here, my neighborhood, to be where I am was because of the teachers in the classroom that stayed after to make sure I got those concepts that I couldn't quite grasp during regular hours. It was because of the deacons at my church. We all have things that we're passionate about. We all have a vision of a future, if not for us, for our children, that has a safer neighborhoods, more opportunities. And the way that we really get after that is voting, but also in between voting, advocating for those passions on a daily basis.
Adrian, what is the first bill you would sponsor after you are sworn into the United States Senate?
Well, I hope I get to vote on a COVID relief bill as soon as possible.
I know what you want to vote on. You make that clear, but I want to know what you want your name on first.
Yeah. I would say, so you do know it's like 300 bills that the House have passed that are waiting in the Senate. So it's not much ground for me to cover individually, because even with the infrastructure bill that I was talking about earlier, the House already passed an infrastructure bill that's waiting in the Senate. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done up front. I don't know if I'll be able to find some niche that isn't already within those 300 bills that I can put my name to, but I can tell you, I'm looking for an infrastructure bill. I'm looking for a COVID relief bill. I'm looking for a bill to make sure that we can raise the minimum wage, that we can protect Social Security. I'm interested in all of that. And if there is somewhere where I can put my name on it, you better believe I'm gonna put my name on it proudly. If it's fighting for our people.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what, Adrian, you ready for the Senate? You know how I know? How's
that?
Because you just filibustered me. I just needed one bill you put your name on.
You know what? Let me. All right, I'm gonna say, because I don't know if there's a bill. I am going to say I do want to pass a bill that will help us bridge our digital divide. If it can't be completely covered in the infrastructure bill, I want to pass a bill that will help us bridge our digital divide. I ran as mayor on a platform that included technology. I'm watching every single day children in our rural areas and children in our urban areas that don't have access to internet.
Yes.
Our school board has handed out computers that are pretty much, technological bricks to these students because they take them back in their neighborhoods and they can't get access to those educational tools that they need. They continue to fall behind their peers. So I hope that I can put my name on a bill that would bridge the digital divide and make sure that high-speed internet is treated as a utility, not as a luxury good here.
That's a bar, Adrian.
Was that good?
Now you're talking.
Was that good? Okay, good.
Technology as a utility and not as a luxury. Y'all get that? Technology as a utility and not as a luxury. Adrian, you better use that talking point on the trail.
I got you.
Take it from somebody.
If you approve it, Angela, I gotta use it. I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna let you know.
This message is approved by me. I'm telling you, I think that would focus group well. I think that would go over very well, because what people want to hear, Adrian, and I think that this interview speaks to it, They want to hear truth. They don't want to hear the fodder, people trying to, you know, waffle and waver and find their place in the middle when they know their truth is over here. Even if people disagree with you. We have people in our families, right, we disagree with. But if you can't be honest about what your truth is, people can discern that. And it's repelling. That's why people don't like politics.
Yeah. No, you're right about that.
Truth,
you're right about that. And I can tell you, Angela, you can do a quick Google search and you can figure out I'm not afraid to speak the truth. As mayor here, in just about 2 years, trust me, I have made a lot of decisions that were not popular, but they were right. They were right in making sure that I protect
you're proudest of?
So I think the thing I'm proudest of is the fact that in my first year in office, Shreveport was as safe as it had been in 45 years. I really focused on public safety and community-oriented policing. Community-oriented policing, where we bridged that law enforcement civilian divide, where people got to know the law enforcement in their neighborhoods. And I talk about that because it allows me to draw another contrast of my opponent, who voted to take hundreds of millions of dollars out of the community-oriented policing program. But I have seen on the ground that community-oriented policing is the key to safer neighborhoods, safer cities. When our police officers get to know the grandmother on the porch, they sit out there and watch everything that's peeking out of her blinds, and she sees everything that's going on, the little kids playing basketball in the street. When our police officers are connected to our citizens, we are a much stronger community.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll save the rest of the policing conversation for later. That's a whole nother pod. I know you got to go. To it. You got to beat these streets. You got to knock on doors safely with masks.
Yes. We do lit drops. We do literature drops.
So no sure canvassing.
We got to keep it safe.
Before you go, how can people who are in Louisiana, people in Shreveport, people all over the country, all over the world who are tuned in, how can they support you, Adrian? Yes,
visit us at perkinsforla.com. You can donate there. You can volunteer there. Visit us on Twitter. We have a Twitter page at perkinsforla.com. We're on Facebook, Adrian Perkins. Find us on social media platforms. Follow us and spread the word. And let me tell y'all, I didn't get a chance to elaborate on this, but everybody's eyes will be on Louisiana in this runoff. It will be after the presidential election. So the month of November, after November 3rd, everybody will be watching Louisiana to figure out if the Senate is red, blue, how blue. So you can be at the forefront. You can be like, I told you Louisiana had this great candidate that's going to go and do great things for us. And we're going to be able to kick out Senator Cassidy from the Senate, who has been doing very harmful things to us. So make sure y'all follow us on social media. Make sure you visit us at our website, and we can keep this movement going.
And I am game. I'm going to find my way to Louisiana after this for this runoff. But before that, y'all make sure you go to this website, donate, help them text folks, help them call people, do whatever we can to help Adrian. You are incredible. Thank you for spending this time with me.
Thank you, Angela. So grateful for the time. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Adrian. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.